The last video I put out was about surfacing your workpiece, and the flag really has to start out with that. So if you haven't seen it yet and surface your workpiece, follow the link up in the corner or down below to the surfacing video. So we finished surfacing both sides. Now we are what's going to be the top side faced up. I've marked the perfect center on that tape there, just by measuring corner to corner from the cut area that I want to use. And now in order to stain it, I'm doing a 2-color stain. If you were doing a single color stain like all black or brown stain one that I've done before, you can just stain the entire thing before putting that center mark there. But what I'm going to do now after marking center is I've set my 0 where it needs to be. I'm going to come through here and trace this square out. So basically I've outlined the union by aligning the left side of these stripes to the right side of this rectangle I've made here, and the top of this one to the bottom of the rectangle by grabbing this number and copying it, pasting into the bottom of that. I'm sorry, X for this one and Y for this one. And then making sure that that rectangle is large enough that we extend past the flag itself. So it should go off of my wood, and that's fine. I'm just going to cut the whole shape out. You could block this out and only cut off like the corner, but I'm going to do this whole thing because it's just going to be faster. So I'm just going to cut that out now, and so I've moved my my spindle over to the center of the stars, and I've set my Z height 0 over there by setting Z0. Now I can lift it up a little bit. Run this outline. Okay, it pops up as completed before it's done because it's already done sending all of the G code. So we are now complete. The next step is to get the spindle out of the way, still hold position this entire time of what I'm going to do next, which is lay down some tape and start staining. Now that we have set our X and Y zeros on the center point here, we no longer need it. It's saved into our OpenBuilds right now. So we can get rid of that point. Now we're ready for blue in here. Peel up this masking, move it to this side, and do the red. And if you don't like the masking idea, you could also go ahead with the razor blades, a separator, and you just basically stick into the wood here a line of razor blades into that groove you cut, and kind of tap them in with a hammer lightly, and then make a good divider so you don't mix the blue with the red and you don't have to deal with the tape. For the colors, I liked the tintable stain by Minwax, the water-based, True Blue, and Scarlet. These are supposedly Home Depot only colors. Lowe's has slightly different tints, and theirs have different names as well. Then you'll want to let it dry, and I actually have a small computer fan here that I will set on to blow it dry, which should take about 5 minutes. And then I will remove this tape, mask this side over here instead, and put the red on there. Allow that to dry as well for about 10 minutes. It's actually already pretty close. One little spot there that got on my finger. So if we're doing this over and over again, the easiest thing to do here is to leave that line one here, and we'll rename that as the Union Outline V bit, so we know what bit to use, even though it shows in the corner. We'll go to the next one here, and we'll just call this stars. And I'll create another one. Call it stripes, and a cutout. So that way, in case there's an issue with the stripes, it won't just go and cut it out immediately, even though we're going to use the same bit for both. So I'm actually going to go in the stars one here and just delete all that stuff out so it's easier to grab these things. You can see here that our stars are going to be full depth. And now that I moved it, I'm just going to hit Control-Z to bring them back. And put them right back in their normal spot. So what we can do now is run this carve. I've also brought this to the same depth that I normally run my stripes at, which is 2 millimeters. I've just gotten used to working in metric. So you can make it a more round number. But the point is, I'd like to have the union outline end up being the same depth as the stripes will be on this other one. So now's a great time to go ahead and do the stripes. I'm just going to delete out by selecting and then pressing backspace. Select my stripes, set them to 2 millimeters, and I don't want to carve all those out with the V-bit. I'm going to make this be a little bit faster of a carve by actually using an 1/8 inch bit in there. And my favorite is a compression, but it's not really going to do that much good in here. So a downcut bit is actually going to produce a cleaner cut on the surface here. Since we don't want to go around sanding this, that is what I'm going to use as an 1/8 inch downcut bit. You could use an upcut, and usually flags are charred a bit, so when you char it, it'll actually burn the fuzzies that result from the upcut. Alternatively, you could go back and sand that a little tiny bit and then char it, and you'll have an even nicer edge there, as long as you don't accidentally sand your stained area. And then when it comes time to cut it out, that will be a great point for a compression bit if you want to do a bit swap. So for this cutout, we're going to go full depth. Since we thinned it significantly, I'm going to have to go and get the actual thickness for it and place it in here. Since we've already set this to full depth, it will auto change that to match whatever the thickness is that we put in here. And I will get that right now and enter that in. 13.66 is going to be fine. So we'll add a little bit to that. So I make sure to cut it all the way out, and I cut a little bit into my wasteboard here. And we will be fine for this next cut. We'll go with the higher number of what I had there, 13.8, just to make sure I get all the way through. And when it comes time to do this carve, I'll make sure to zero on that front left. Zero my Z height on that front left just to make sure. And you'll notice in here, I have tabs set up to where my material is. I don't care so much about the top and bottom. You'll notice when this cuts out, it is very close to that. Then the next thing to carve here is the stars. And to do that, I'm just going to export this G code.
All right, we are ready to send this one on its way. I haven't lost my 0 points here. That's what I ran it up from before. The machine's been turned on, holding position the whole time. That we stained it, and our Z0 is lifted to its current safe height. And I did set the Z0 using the center point in here, so it should be good to run. All right.
So now I'm going to do a bit change and tighten that up pretty snug. And then I will grab bring this guy here up as far as it'll go. So now that our spindle is set in there with the paper method, we can set 0 here. And since when you click Run Job, it angles over and up towards the first cut position. It doesn't just lift straight up to safe and then move from there, just because of the G code that comes out of Easel. So you have to set your 0 and then lift it to whatever your safe point is for yourself. I wouldn't leave it at 0 because it could just drag right across the surface if your 0 wasn't, if there was a high point somewhere else. So now what our next step is here is to go into Easel and grab our stripes. Grab our stripes, 1/8 inch bit. Our simulation here says 19 minutes. Oh, I haven't even changed the cut settings to its default. So that's a full depth pass, 2 millimeters. That should be fine. Feed rate, yep, all that's good. I like this X raster instead of the offset one because it keeps it in line with our stripe direction. So if there's any machine marks that are left, they're parallel to the stripes instead of like a circular or awkward. It would leave awkward corner marks over here as it made that change from X to Y in the shapes. So that parallel X pass comes out pretty nice for these stripes. That's what we're looking at, 11 minutes. So I will go ahead and export this one more time. Open G code, the most recent one. And we are ready to go. So I'll position this so you guys can see it while it's cutting. And I'm ready to turn on my spindle and let this one fly. This is going to make a little bit more of a mess, so I guess I'll just clean it up afterwards. And here we go. right here I'm adjusting the feed and depth per pass a little bit on this cutout pass. And after generating and saving the G code, I'm going to go through and set the Z height. But what I'm actually going to do is to use the paper method on the wasteboard and then lift it by the height of the thickness that I set in Easel, and then hit 0 again. And what that's going to do is allow me to use Easel's zeroing off the top surface, but rather than just measuring and going off the top of the board, I'm tricking it a little bit by using the top of the wasteboard and then lifting it by the defined amount that I put in Easel. It kind of prevents me from cutting into my wasteboard too much. So what you're seeing here is I brought the spindle forward, and I'm going to just drop the Z height down till I can see that it's above the wasteboard, pretty close. And then I'll come through with the paper and just creep it down a little tiny bit at a time, a tenth of a millimeter at a time, and slide the paper around until the paper no longer moves. And that is the setting the Z 0 using the paper method. And so what that gives me here is the 0 of the wasteboard top. But because we used Easel, I have to use the 0 of the top of the material as the material was defined within Easel. So now that I've found the 0 of the wasteboard, I'm going to set 0 right there, and then I will lift it by the amount that I told Easel the board was thick, in this case 13.7 millimeters. And then now that it's at that height, I will click 0 again. I actually told Easel it was 13.8, so that extra 0.1 millimeter is what it's going to carve into the wasteboard. So now I've set the true 0, which is 13.7 above the wasteboard surface. I'm going to lift it a little bit more as my safety height so I can clear the top of this board without scratching it, and then just bring it right back to the X and Y 0. And now that I've got that point, I'm ready to go and start. So really the easiest way to get one of these out is to take a flush cut saw, this cheap one from Harbor Freight, works just fine, and remove the tabs. So we can go ahead and char it right now. And I'll show you how I do that real quick. An important thing to think about as you're charring these flags is to char the back. Because what we've effectively done on the front is we've removed a lot of the moisture from it through that fire process. And the front of it has started to cup inwards from the removal of the moisture. So we're going to char the back, and that's going to fight that cupping of the front pretty well. And now our board is no longer cupped. Since I did use a compression bit instead of the down cut bit I was planning on using, I do end up with some fuzzies in here, and there are some tricks to get that off, some easy tricks. Those fuzzies, now that they're charred, come off really easily, and a cheap paintbrush with the bristles cut down to give it a little bit more rigidity comes right through there and brushes those off. And then one quick blowdown with some compressed air to get them off the flag. Now that we're done on the CNC, I'm going to take a router, handheld router, and add a keyhole to the back to hang it on a wall and clear coat it with some clear polyurethane. So I've gone ahead and ran the keyhole slot in the top part of the flag here on the back side, and that's going to give the buyer a place to hang it up. I just used the standard Rockler keyhole bit and the jig for slotting that came with the router. Thank you all for watching this video.